Have you ever been like super into a game? Like you're watching your favorite team and it's like down to the wire. And you kind of catch yourself hoping for like some kind of miracle.
Yeah, yeah.
Almost like wishing there was someone there, pulling for you. Come on, just this once, help them out. So today we're going to kind of dive into this whole idea
Okay.
of, like divine authority, what it means to have, a higher power on your side. We're looking at this text called Talking About Jesus, which I got to say kind of turns this whole idea on its head.
Yeah, it really approaches it from a different angle than we might expect.
Okay, so it starts off with this story about Joshua.
Right.
He's encountering the commander of God's army. And so you're thinking, okay, here we go. God's going to come in and, help the Israelites out.
Yeah, you think so, right?
Yeah, totally. But Joshua's like, hold on, whose side are you on?
Oh, wow.
And the answer is neither.
Now that is a twist.
Yeah, it totally throws you off.
Really makes you rethink things.
So what's the deal?
And the story's not about God picking sides in our human conflicts, like we do with our political parties and all.
Yeah.
It's more about recognizing there's this authority, this higher power that's beyond all that. We always want God to be on our side, but this is asking, what if it's about us being on God's side instead?
Whoa, okay, that's a big difference.
Yeah, it completely shifts the perspective.
So like in our world, leaders are supposed to represent, the people.
Right.
So does that mean the people ultimately hold the power?
That's where this idea of divine sovereignty comes in. You see, unlike human systems, they rise and fall, but God's authority, that's constant. It's less about God saying, okay, I agree with your plan, and more about us figuring out, okay, what is God's will and how do I align with that?
So are we talking about like giving up our own control? Our ambitions and stuff?
It's not necessarily about giving up, but it's definitely a shift, right?
Yeah.
Instead of trying to get God to sign on to our projects, it's about understanding what God's already doing and joining in on that.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see the difference here.
Yeah.
But how do we even figure out what God's side is?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's one we're going to explore as we keep going with this deep dive.
Man, I am hooked. This is really making me think about how I approach like all kinds of challenges in my own life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we're talking about figuring out what God's side even is.
Right.
Is it like we got to solve some cosmic riddle or something?
It's not so much about solving a puzzle.
Okay.
It's more like we need to grow in discernment.
Discernment.
Yeah, like the text talks about aligning our choices with things like justice and love and compassion.
Okay.
Those kind of qualities that lots of faiths connect with God's character.
So it's like we got to look past just the immediate situation.
Exactly.
And try to see what lines up with those bigger values.
Yeah, instead of asking, will this benefit me, you ask, what would love and justice look like here?
That's a good point.
It's subtle, but it can totally change things.
But honestly, sometimes life is so messy.
It really is.
How can we be sure we're actually choosing what God wants?
You've hit on something important there.
Yeah.
This text isn't giving us like a formula or a rule book.
Right.
It's more about learning to seek wisdom and guidance.
Okay.
Trying to get our hearts and minds in tune with God's will.
So instead of like praying, God, please bless my plan.
Yeah.
It's more like, God, help me understand what your plan is.
Exactly. It's about realizing we don't have all the answers.
Right.
There's a bigger picture that we just don't see.
It's funny. This whole being on God's side thing.
Yeah.
It almost feels backwards.
In a way.
Like
yeah.
naturally we want to get God on board with our stuff.
Right. Right.
But this text is like flipping that on its head.
It is. It's definitely a challenging idea.
It is.
But it also brings a lot of freedom.
Freedom.
How so? Well, think about it. When we're always trying to win God over, there's a lot of anxiety there. Like, am I doing the right thing? Will God be happy with this?
Yeah.
But if we shift to just aligning ourselves with God's will,
Okay.
it's less about our ego, our plans.
Right.
It's about surrendering to something bigger.
So it's not about getting God's favor.
No.
It's about joining with this like greater good.
That's it. And in that alignment, we might find a different kind of winning.
Interesting.
A sense of peace, of purpose,
Okay.
even strength that comes from knowing we're in sync with something beyond ourselves.
I like that. It's not about like manipulating the scoreboard. It's about playing the game by a higher standard.
And that's where this text really hits home.
Yeah.
It's a call to a deeper way of living and leading, one that goes beyond our limited human viewpoints.
Okay.
and tries to embody something more divine in the world.
This idea of being on God's side really sticks with you.
It does.
It's not just about blindly obeying.
Right. Yeah.
It's about actively trying to do what's good and right.
Exactly. And even when it's hard.
Yeah, even when it's tough.
Yeah. The text reminds us that all these earthly kingdoms, they come and go. But God's kingdom, that's going to last.
We're not just playing for the short term here.
Right. It's the long game.
Yeah, it's about aligning with something bigger than all the little power struggle.
Exactly. Contributing to something that matters.
After looking at this text, I'm realizing it's less about having all the answers. It's more about asking the right questions.
What kinds of questions?
Like, okay, what does it even mean to be on God's side right now?
In this moment.
Yeah, in this situation. How can I show God's love and justice?
Right.
In how I lead, how I make decisions.
Even in our everyday interactions.
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of this text. It doesn't hand us a bunch of rules.
Right.
It invites us into this deeper conversation.
Of ourselves.
With ourselves and, for those who believe with God.
So if we can't ask God to be on our side,
Yeah.
how does that change how we handle, challenges and decisions?
Yeah, and even conflicts.
It's a whole different way of thinking.
It is.
That's a powerful question to really sit with.
It is. It really is.
Maybe true leadership isn't about demanding God back up our plans.
Right.
It's about humbly trying to understand and follow a purpose way bigger than us.
That's a great way to put it.
It's almost like the text is saying, don't try to win God over, let God win you over.
That's beautiful.
Well, hey, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you something to think about, maybe even a new way of looking at what it means to lead a life that's, really on the side of something good.